This video has been put together to help administer the TCEO numeracy and oral language test. It's particularly useful for people who are new to the project or those who may not have administered the test for a period of time and like a bit of a refresher on how to go about doing it. It is really important that the test is valid, and in order to do that, we must be consistent with the way that the test is administered. And that's essentially the purpose of this video. The object is to create meaningful data. And it's worthwhile looking at what we mean by that. And what we mean by that is providing an initial benchmark, appreciating what our children are actually coming into school with, the knowledge that they already have acquired. This testing gives insights into the information that the children already have in order to move them on as individuals. It enables teachers to help differentiate for the needs of their learners by looking at the children who have certain information, certain knowledge and skills, appreciating that and moving them on as individuals. It also helps determine where possible interventions are needed for children who are coming to school, coming into prep, for example, not having particular skills. What can we do to help move those children forward? At the end of the day, the most important aim of the project is to help improve services, those ones provided by the TCEO speech pathologists and other support services. Questions that we hope to answer during the course of this video. Questions like, which skills are we testing? When should it be used? How long should it take? What resources do I need to actually administer the test? As well as we'll talk about how the feedback occurs, what it will look like. So let's have a look at what skills are tested. Well, as far as numeracy is concerned, the main focus is on number and place value. Other strands, though, are also represented, for example, measurement, shape, patterns, and algebra. As far as oral language is concerned, the speech pathologists who have been involved in writing those questions have focused on three areas: phonological awareness, identifying rhyme and producing rhyme, expressive language, correct use of grammatical structures, and receptive language. And an example there is the ability to answer a variety of question styles. We've made sure that both the numeracy and the oral language component do actually align with the Australian curriculum. And when we provide feedback, each of the questions are linked to a content description where possible. So when should it be used? When should we look at administering the test? Well, we aim in term 1 to do the testing during weeks 3 and 4. In saying that, for prep students, being new to the school, that may be daunting. So it might be worthwhile starting the testing procedure with year 1 in week 3 and then going on to prep in week 4. The aim, remember, is to provide this meaningful data. So when the testing occurs early, we aim then to have the data and feedback sessions quite early. The post-testing occurs later on in the year during term 3. That aim then is to provide feedback prior to the end of term 3 so that any changes that need to be made can be done so during the 4th term. For example, we give information on certain areas in the curriculum for whatever reason that children are not performing particularly well in. Well, we provide this feedback early enough, it gives term 4 in order to potentially reteach those particular content descriptions. The classroom teacher is always the person who is best to administer the test. How long should it take? Well, it's useful to aim for about 20 minutes per student. We have found in the past that the pre-test is a bit quicker to implement than the post-test. And we continually are trying to make changes in terms of the technology involved in order to make the testing procedure as short as possible. So how do we start the testing process? Well, you'll receive an email from myself, Kate, in your inbox you will find an email from myself and it'll have an attachment, and the attachment will have your class list. Each child in your class will have a unique form, Google form, that has been created for them. So simply click on the link and it will take you to the Google form that is unique to them. The first few fields of the form have been pre-populated with the information that is specific to that child. So the information regarding the school, the class, their name. We also use a student ID in order to track students, as well as their gender and date of birth. All this information is pre-populated into the form. As far as you are concerned, you start asking the questions and as an interview style and entering in whether or not the response is either correct or incorrect. So what do you need to administer the test? Well, there is a bit of technology involved. The first thing is that the teacher will need a device. Now, you can use an iPad if you like, but your staff-issued laptop is probably the best. The teacher will need that in order to log in, check their email. They will get that email with an attached class list that I mentioned. They will click on the unique URL for that child. It will take you to the Google form. The child will also need a student booklet. There are some things that a child can answer verbally. However, we are interested particularly in prep with how they're writing their numerals and how they're actually forming them. So we use the student booklets purely for that purpose. You observe how the child has written their numbers. For example, one of the questions is to stick 4 stickers in the bag and write the number in the square. If the child has written the number 4 correctly in the square, then you tick that it is correct. The student booklets are purely for school use. After that, I don't need them sent in to me. The data gets collected by the Google form. The other thing that we make use of is little round sticky dots. We like the children being able to use some form of concrete material. Of course, if you didn't want to use sticky dots, which are good because you then have a permanent record, you can file this test and maybe use it for teacher interviews, parent-teacher interviews. If you don't want to use sticky dots, you can, of course, use counters, as long as the child is manipulating some form of concrete material and essentially using the correct numbers. With what will I need to administer the test? We've already worked out that the teacher will need a device, laptop or iPad. The student will need a student booklet in order to write their responses. The other thing that the child will need access to is an iPad or similar device, as we do use stimulus images throughout the test. So the student will need an iPad in their hands, access to the student booklet, little sticky dots to stick, and you yourself as a teacher will require a laptop or similar device. How to administer. What we ask is, in order to obtain some form of validity, is that everyone tries to be consistent with the way that they actually are asking the questions. So we ask that you read exactly verbatim the words that are in bold. They're in black, bold instructions. You can obviously repeat these instructions. However, it's important that you don't provide additional prompting, extra information, your facial expressions, and so forth. There is grey prompting also provided, which may help if you're trying to elicit a particular response from a child. It's important too that we do provide some positive feedback to the students, but make it of a general nature rather than being very specific. So how is it scored? Well, most questions are marked as either correct or incorrect. However, some of the oral language questions have a third response that says other response, and this really did come out of a need. I'll share with you a scenario that we had that made it obvious to us that the option of other response was really, really vital. We had this question here. This is the stimulus image, which the child would have on an iPad, and this is the question that appears in the Google form that the teacher reads. The The target response or the target structure that we're after here is correct use of the pronoun. So we're trying to elicit that response from the child. So the teacher would say, let's look at some pictures. I want you to help me finish what I say about each one. In this picture, she is swinging. And what we're wanting there is for the child to say he is sliding. That's the targeted structure. We had a scenario where we gave this particular question to two children. They were aged 2.5 years apart. Now, the first child, when asked this question, said, "Oh, that's a photo of me. I'm sliding down the slide." Well, it happened to me, might be my son that we asked that question to. But under the original format of correct or incorrect, he would have been marked incorrect because he didn't use the target structure. The target structure, of course, was he is sliding. We then asked the same question to my daughter, 2.5 years younger. She responded by saying him sliding. Now, clearly, she was using the pronoun incorrectly. If we went through the option of having only two responses, both of my children would have been marked incorrectly, but clearly that doesn't reflect their ability. So we put in the option of other response. We're really interested in looking at whether or not they can use the structure correctly, he is sliding, incorrectly, him sliding or she sliding, and of course we need to allow for the other response. There is an option to type the response, and it very much is optional. It does slow down the testing procedure if you insist on typing the response for each child. So it's worthwhile, particularly if you're doing the post-test in prep, if the child is still incorrectly using the pronoun by saying him sliding, it's worthwhile typing in that child's response, and then that can be forwarded to the speech pathologist. There is further help, particularly with the oral language side of things, to help with the scoring, and it just makes it obvious what the target structure is. So these two links will take you to how to help on how to go about scoring these questions. Results and feedback. Well, I really do try and get the feedback occurring as soon as possible. Some schools like to use the data as part of their parent-teacher oral report interviews. So for those schools in particular, I try and get the feedback means occurring nice and early. Of course, with a lot of schools being involved in the project, particularly this year, we've got approximately 18 schools to visit. It will take a period of time, and we do need to align with the speech pathologist who is also visiting. In terms of the analysis, well, we look at whole class trends, which is very valuable. We also look at by child how they have gone on the testing. When we look at later on in the year in term 3, we look at the comparison between the pre and post-test data, and really we're interested in value addedness, how much gains have actually been made, and usually it is a real celebration. We can look at the successes that we've had, but then we can look at other areas that for whatever reason are still low, and what can we do to move our students on as individuals. The data does come via a website, so by signing up to the project you get access to the early years project site, which has lots of information. It will house the school data, but we're trying to add a bit more value into this website as well. So there are numeracy resources and oral language resources, sample assessment items that we've been collecting from prep all the way through to year 3. Some of the sample assessments have samples of student work. Most importantly, they all have current GTMJs. So this is what the data looks like. You'll be presented with, we call this a motion graph, and this one here is very much the emphasis is on the child as an individual. And you'll also get some graphical representation of the data, which looks at trends across the class. This graph in particular is looking at the comparison between the pre and the post-test data. And as you can imagine, for this teacher, 29% of the students in the class had success with this question at the start of the year. By term 3, we had 91%. So that's huge gains being made. So obviously that was a very positive story for that teacher. The limitations of the test. Well, it can't measure creativity, social skills, or their excellence in physical performance. There's lots of other things that this test can't test, which are valued. Resilience, for example, is something that we want our children to have, and I can't tell you anything about that. What I can tell you about is their skills in terms of numeracy and oral language. The other limitation is it gives 2 single scores, one for numeracy and one for oral language. Well, if it's going to have a major impact on a child, we would never suggest relying on a single score. You need to look at multiple sources of information. This is one piece of information that was collected on a particular day. Whilst it is valuable information, it was never intended to be the one factor that determines something like access to learning enrichment or not. So whilst it does have some limitations, it will really give you valuable information regarding academic learning. It will help inform your teaching, but also it'll allow you to celebrate some successes and potentially enable you to ponder the not so successful. If you have any further questions, you can always email me. I'm ksargent@ryan.catholic.edu.au, or you can ask your school's speech pathologist.